Just a quick disclaimer, this is not my own video. This is someone I found on YouTube. Her name is Dr. Beverly Clearly. If you want to check out her channel, I will leave a link in the description.
Remembrance Day will soon be here again, and the question I have for you this year is, do we even know what we're supposed to be remembering? Last year I shared with you the story of my great aunt Joyce and her fiancé in the Second World War. If you've not watched that video, I encourage you to do so. I shared that a number of my family members served in different wars, and those that came back shared some of their stories. Now, most of the time, veterans don't share their stories simply because they're too traumatic to tell. However, this is part of what I feel we need to remember. Today, I'm going to share with you a story of an old friend of the family that made an impact on me as a child. His name was Herman McRae, and he lived in a small town called Knowlton in Quebec, not too far away from where my grandparents were on the farm in Iron Hill. Herman was a bit of a mystery to me because he wasn't like regular people. He was an old man who slurred his words and he walked crooked. He would stumble into the farmhouse, always with this big grin on his face, but it didn't match his eyes. And I remember they're actually pretty blue eyes, but they looked empty, like part of him was lost in there. And somehow it made me sad, even though I was little. I asked my Nan, "Why does Herman talk and walk so funny, Nan?" She said, "He's drunk, dear." Now, I had seen people who were kind of drunk before. My great-uncle Albert, who we called Bubs, was often drunk, but not like Herman. I don't think Herman had been sober since before 1945. He'd sit down at the farm table and Nan would pour him a cup of coffee and ask him if he had eaten anything at all that day. And as usual, the answer was no. He didn't eat, he just drank. So she would whip him up some fried potatoes, some hamburger with onions, just to get some food into him. And I would sit and stare, which probably was really rude, but I don't think he noticed, at least not much. I asked my grandmother, "Why is he drunk all the time? And why do his eyes look like that?" She said, "He was in the big war, honey." Now, Nan was born in 1924, and so she knew all about the war. Her friends, her sister, her brothers, her husband, they'd all been part of it, and she got to worry about all of them. Grampy was born in 1911, and he had been conscripted into the Second World War. Herman found solace with his friends at home who had known him before the war and after, who he had been and who he had become. And so he would walk miles and miles to visit the farm and my grandparents. In fact, it would take him the whole day to walk, because of course he couldn't drive. I'd say, "I don't understand, Nan. I know that people went to the big war, but how come it's different for Herman than Grampy? Grampy's not drunk. And then Uncle Bubs, he went to the Korean War and he's drunk a lot of the time. So why do some people get drunk after war and others don't?" I guess I was studying human behavior from a very young age. She told me, "Your grandfather didn't see the terrible things because he wasn't put directly in the line of combat at that time. Your Uncle Bubs was. And that's why Bubs drinks, and that's why he never married, as good and handsome as he was. He was just never the same once he came back. And that's also why we don't make fun of him when he falls down, and why you don't ever tease him, right?" "Yes, Nan." Now, Herman saw terrible things, even worse than Uncle Bubs, she said. My eyes grew wide. What in the world did he see? What did he see? I had to know. No, she said. "This is not something for little girls to know." "But I want to know. I want to understand. Please, Nan, tell me. I'm big enough. Tell me." "Okay," she said, "but you don't go around telling other people about it." And I agreed, until now, because I realize that hearing about it is exactly what other people need. It was his story, his testimony, and his pain. It was our freedom. It was us who benefited. And even at a young age, I knew this was important, so I persisted, and I listened, and when she told me, I never forgot. She said, Herman was with his friends, and they were all in a very big vehicle. They called it a tank, and the men would fit inside almost like sardines, and it would roll along the land and had a big gun, and the enemy would shoot at it, and each brave man took his turn shooting from the tank as well, and that was a very dangerous job. Inside the tank, it was very hot and cramped and loud from the engine and the guns, and it was hard to breathe. And there was no toilet. Sometimes the men even had to sleep in there, as it wasn't safe to go out. So you can understand that a man could only be in there for so long, and he would be taken off tank duty. And some men actually lost their minds. They just couldn't handle it. There was a hatch at the top, an opening, and sometimes the soldiers would shoot guns from there, but they had to be very careful and very quick. Now, as a claustrophobic child, it sounded to me like a nightmare. And of course it was. When the bullets would hit against the tank, it could be almost deafening and scary because you know that those people want to hurt you, and you weren't entirely safe inside either. And some of the men lost their hearing. And Herman was stuck inside the tank, Nan? Yes, she said with his friends. Were they all good friends, Nan? Best friends all stuck together? I think so, she said. Herman had told me that they had gone through a lot together and they knew each other and their stories. And they all shared about home and what they were looking forward to coming back here to in Canada, sitting in their own kitchens. And they talked about what they were going to do when they got back and the people that were waiting for them here, their families. Oh, that's nice. So what happened in the tank, Nan? She sighed, and I could tell that she was still deliberating about how much she was going to share as she poured her cup of tea and put it on the table. She couldn't look me in the eye when she told the story. She just dropped her head. I guess one of his friends panicked inside the tank. He couldn't handle the noise, the lack of air, and how bad he was feeling inside. And they'd been in the tank for a long time, and remember I told you that that's a very hard place to be. And sometimes you can't take it anymore. Well, they tried to calm their friend down, but they couldn't. And he actually climbed over top of them to get out. And they yelled at him, "Don't do it! Don't do it!" They begged him as he reached up and opened the hatch at the top of the tank. "I need to breathe," he said, "I need to breathe." And as soon as his head popped out of that tank, it got shut off. Completely shut off. And down his body fell into the tank amongst his friends. She grew quiet and she raised her cup of tea to her lips, taking a big gulp. I was mortified by the visual. I had never thought about somebody being without a head before. Was that even possible? And how awful it would be and terrifying to be beside that body, trapped in there. For how many hours that they were together in that tank, with the terror, the stench, and the decapitated body of their friend? I don't know, but it's safe to say that Herman and everyone else in that tank would never be the same again. It's this wretched experience that he was trying to drink away, even years later, and for the rest of his sad life he would do the same. Is that a gruesome story? Yeah, it is. And it's not an uncommon one. It's worth telling, though, because it's real and it's true, and it was done for you and for me and every other Canadian to be able to have the rights that we've been enjoying up to this day. And this is what we are remembering. The sacrifices that brave people made in order to buy us our freedoms that allowed Canada to remain a free country by their blood. I was privileged to know the story and other equally terrifying and tragic stories related to the wars. Nan, Grampy, Bubs, Herman, Joyce, they're all dead now, but their testimonies live on in me and now in you. All men aged 21 to 45 were drafted. Whether that was your only son or not, he went. Whether that was your new husband or your fiancé, he went. Women also sacrificed during that time and put themselves in danger, and they fought for us to have our freedoms in this country. What do you think that the survival rate was for people going into the front lines of war? I'm going to guess that it was less than a 99.5% chance of surviving. I personally will not relinquish the rights that were given to me by people like Herman and his friends, because these were bought at a huge price, one that people have forgotten about because others paid it. We say, lest we forget, but now people don't even know what they're supposed to be remembering. I am not going to cancel my country or my freedoms. I can't imagine what the men of my grandfather's generation would be saying in the face of things that we are seeing now. As a nation, we've become complacent, compliant, and we've forgotten who we are, where we're from, what our history is, and all that it stands for. People would ask me, why would I want to be part of an organization like the Legion? Isn't that where old men go to drink? Yes, I'd say it is. And maybe you don't know why they drink, but I do. At least I have a good idea of why. And I will try to help relieve their pain if I can. It's part of what I do professionally. But if I can't, then I will simply honor them as they empty their glasses and raise mine to them. Maybe not every Canadian and not every Legionnaire will agree with me about preserving our rights and our freedoms. But those who sacrificed long ago, I think, would. And that's what the war was about, keeping our land, our country whole and not divided, keeping freedom of speech, beliefs, fair treatment, movement, privacy, including of medical care, self-ownership and autonomy, and all the other things written in our Charter of Rights, which is the prime law, the foundation of our country, and no other law can legally usurp it. I am blessed to have a Canadian passport because I was born here. But beyond that, my family also earned this for me. They fought for my right to my passport. And this should be the only one that I need to get anywhere or do anything. No questions asked. To the legions and institutions that require more than this, you have failed us and are betraying our country to the extent that I am no longer as proud to wear this uniform as I formerly was. To those in power who are betraying their own people, you will be held accountable. We have a great country and a poor government, but the country is greater than the people who are hired to run it. Yes, the laws and the people of the country are greater than the false laws and the people of the government. I will follow the laws of my country, and I will disregard anything that is in violation of that which was fought for as a Canadian. To our military, please, we need you. Our country needs you. Step up, be Canadian, and serve our country. We need you more now than ever, and we need it at home. If those World War II soldiers were only thinking about how they could keep themselves safe, you would have no rights and no country to be giving away now. They ran headlong into real danger for us, and they didn't have the option of socially distancing from a true enemy or staying safe at home. Ask somebody who's actually been through hard times, if these have been hard times, and you're going to get a different perspective, despite all the complaining that's been happening. That doesn't mean that hard times aren't coming, because when you relinquish your freedoms, all sorts of things can happen. History proves that to be true. Believe me, or do not believe me, but believe our past. I invite you to join with me as my fellow Canadians to practice peaceful non-compliance, to remember and honor our past, to take control of our future, and to never forget what we are all supposed to be remembering.